I think we're on. Welcome to my first real kind of stream. I'm attempting to do a stream on Twitch, and I'll publish it to YouTube later. And it's not something I've ever done before. Don't know if it's even going to work. But what I want to do in this first kind of episode or edition, where I know I don't yet have anyone watching live, but first and foremost, it's to let you know my schedule. So I'm talking about Australian time. I know I'm on the east coast of Australia, and I'll be streaming around this time, which is 6 in the morning. 6 in the morning Sydney time. So convert that to your time, all right? 6 in the morning Thursday of Sydney. What is that in terms of your time? And if you'd like to, you can get on Twitch and search for Mike's Chess videos there, and you'll be able to join in on the stream at that time. It'll be Thursday morning 6 a.m. Sydney time, as well as Saturday morning 6 a.m. Sydney time, and Sunday morning 6 a.m. Sydney time. So we'll start with that. Keep up to date. I'll change the schedule if it doesn't work for me anymore, but that's what we're going to try to start with. Now today, I want to look at this position which arose in a game between me and my grandfather. My grandfather is the fellow that really helped me to learn to love chess in a large way by playing chess with him. And I'm sure that's the story with a lot of people. In this position, I had the black pieces and he had the white pieces. And what's notable about this position is that the material count is equal. We both have a knight. We both have 2 bishops. We both have 2 rooks. And we both have 3 pawns on this side of the board and 3 pawns on this side of the board. So why is it that actually as black, the black pieces here are a lot better than the white pieces? Well, the reason is because material is immaterial. And that's a very profound and deep truth about the universe that's actually reflected on the chessboard, part of the reason why I love the game. What do I mean by material is immaterial? Well, what I really mean is that there is a deeper dimension to the game that's not about how many pieces you have. It's more about the spirit of those pieces and what those pieces are doing. Now, that's what we're going to be looking at in this particular position to try and understand why. Why is it that the computer gives an evaluation here of 2.7 in black's favor? Which is, what my instinct was when I was playing this position. Well, here's some of my thinking behind this, and I hope this will be insightful for you if you're trying to learn some chess, because these are things that are really important to understand, but they wouldn't necessarily come intuitively, because intuitively, you look around, you see the equal pieces, and that's about it. Also, it's black's turn here, but if you were to pause the video, and most of the time people don't do that, but if you do, have a look around and see what moves you might try and play for black. What you'll find is that although it's, a very strong position for black, it's actually not that easy to find, the way to continue on. How do you continue on and maintain this advantage is not so easy. So let me tell you some of my thoughts about this position. First and foremost, king safety. The white king is actually stuck in the middle of the board. The way you know it's stuck in the middle of the board is because it's on a light square. The king never starts on a light square. The king starts on a square the opposite color of itself. So the white king would start on this dark square here on E1. The fact that it's moved over to D1 means that it's participated in a trade or otherwise moved itself, and it can no longer castle. So it can't castle over on this side, certainly can't castle this side. It's stuck in the middle. Now compare that to the black king. The black king is tucked away in the corner, behind 2 of its pawns. And furthermore, the white king is facing pressure from this bishop right up in its grill, and this knight very near its grill. It's also facing long range pressure from this bishop pointing roughly towards it, and from both of these rooks also pointing towards it. Whereas the black king has some pressure from this bishop long range, But that's really it. There's no other pressure against this king. And this king is easily able to absorb this pressure against the pawn. The pawn's always protected, and there's nothing else, no other white pieces there to help this bishop out in attacking the king. Okay, so that's a very important first thing to notice. Yes, the material is equal, but king safety is not equal, and that obviously matters a lot. Now, what else is really important here is piece activity. What I mean by that is, look at white's pieces versus black's pieces. Let's look at black's pieces first. Black can do pretty much almost anything. You know, this rook can take one step up or two steps up. It can't come here because it would just be taken by this bishop. It can't come here or here or here or here because those squares are all defended from white pieces in a variety of ways. But it has quite a few options here. This rook also has quite a few options. They can also come this way if they wanted to. This bishop has a bunch of options in a lot of directions. It could even come here or trade itself for the knight. This knight has options. It can come this way. It can come back if it wants. It can come here. This bishop has a variety of options. The king can move. The pawns could move if they wanted. There's just freedom of mobility. That's what is called piece activity. Now compare this to white. Compare this to white. This rook can't come here because we just take it straight away. And if it comes here, well, firstly, it's not doing anything there. Secondly, if we wanted to, this bishop could then just jump back, attack that rook, and push it back to where it came from. So the rook's not doing a lot. The bishop can't move here because we've got that square defended by two pieces, so it would die here. It would also die here, and it's blocked by its own pawn here, so it can't move. Now, this pawn can move, and if this pawn were to move forward, trying to make room for this bishop, well, even if this bishop were to get here, hypothetically, now this pawn lacks defense, and at the very least, we can take that pawn like so. So, what I really mean to say is that the white bishop really can't move. It's also very much trapped. The pawns here can't move. This pawn can't move either. Anywhere it moves, whether it's here and just gets taken, or whether it came all the way down here and still gets taken en passant. So basically, everything of white is tied up. Everything of white is tied up, and not in a very good way. Now, what if we move over to the king side? This pawn can't move. This pawn we've seen can move, but it doesn't really achieve too much in so doing. Now, this pawn also can't move, really, because anywhere it goes, it can be captured. So what does that really leave white with? Well, it leaves white with the bishop, which can move a little bit, just a little bit, and also with the knight and the king. So the king could potentially move, and the knight. But if you look more closely at the knight, this is really interesting. The knight actually can't move anywhere either. If the knight were to move, say here, then we can take with the rook, and it would actually be checkmate. Okay, now, if the knight were to move here, well, again, we can actually just take that, and there's a pin used by this rook on this pawn, so the pawn can't actually take the rook because it would expose the king. So that wouldn't be possible. And finally, the knight cannot also move here because, again, we've just got that covered too many times. If the knight moves here, well, obviously we could take it. We could take it with the pawn, but there's an even better move, and that is I'm using this strange analysis board. That would be playing this checkmate here. And that would also go if the knight were to move here. If you move there, well, I'm afraid there's also a checkmate. So really the knight just can't move. Okay, so that is maybe a long-winded way of saying white is completely tied down, black has freedom of mobility, white's king is unsafe, black's king is safe, and those are probably the main reasons why black is better. But the question remains, what do you do next? And that's where things get a bit difficult, because even though you are better here as black, what's the main idea? I mean, how do you proceed? Do you place a knight maybe here, attacking this bishop? Well, if you do, well, you're giving white a chance to trade pieces. And you can see, yes, your position is still better, but it's worse than what it was. You've given up some of your advantage. If you keep on making moves where you give up some of your advantage, I've got news for you. It's going to end up in a draw or worse. So you probably don't want to do that. Same sort of thing with this move, with the bishop move. You're allowing these trades, and you may even end up worse if you're not careful. So again, you have to be very careful to choose the right course. Now, another sort of thought that I was considering here in this game was, what if I drop this bishop back here and just completely, freeze this whole position, and also then maybe one day I can hope to get my knight from here to here, and then ultimately to here, and land a fork against the king and the rook. I mean, it's an idea. The problem is it's far-fetched. What do I mean by far-fetched? Well, the moment my knight lands here, we've already seen he can just trade things, and it's not necessarily as good for me as it was. Remember, it used to be 2.7 in my favor. Now it's only 1.3. I don't want my advantage to be diminishing. I want it to be maintained or increasing. So, and of course, when you're playing a game, you don't have this bar here telling you whether or not the candidate moves you're considering are actually good. So, just give me one moment here. I need to check, because I do have a tournament coming up, an online tournament. I want to make sure I'm not going to miss out on that. So, just give me one moment. Okay, still got 7 minutes till that tournament begins. Right, that should be enough time to finish this quick analysis. So, as I said, maybe one of the ideas white might have to gain counterplay would be to push this pawn forward to free up this square for his bishop. Even if it means he sacrifices this pawn, at least he gets some piece activity there. As a result, you might think, hey, maybe I'll prevent this pawn from moving forward. Although you don't have to really prevent that, because your bishop already prevents it. It's really annoying. Why is this board doing this? If this pawn were to move forward, the bishop here covers. So you don't actually have to worry about that. But really, what else is there? This is where the idea comes that actually there is an open file on the board, and only one open file. Rooks like to get doubled on the open file. So how about we double rooks? And what that would mean is we'd lift one of the rooks up, and I think we put it on the light square, because we know that this light squared bishop is never going to really be able to get here and harass this rook. Whereas if we put it on a dark square, we might have to worry about the bishop here just harassing us, which is just annoying. We don't even want to think about that. So let's lift it up to a light square. And my thought here was, what does white do? If they move the king, I mean, they're not really doing much. We already know that they're not getting anywhere by moving the rook. They can't move the bishop. They can't move the knight, for the reasons we saw before. This rook can't really get in the game either. This rook can't get in the game. If it ever comes here, I mean, it's not achieving anything. It can't come here because of our bishop and knight. It can't come here because of our bishop. It can come here, but it doesn't really achieve much. And here it doesn't achieve much either, although it attacks this pawn. It's just simply not enough. Okay, so point is, in this position, white is, as we saw before, very limited. We haven't given them an opportunity to trade pieces by placing a knight or a bishop here and allowing him to trade. No. We've done something instead called tightening the screws. We've created an incremental improvement in our position, and that incremental improvement is simply that we have created the opportunity to double our rooks on an open file. And why is that so good? Watch this. Let's say white decides, with their limited options, to move their bishop here and attack this pawn. Your first instinct might be, you want to defend that pawn. But if you defend that pawn, you give white an opportunity now to play the rook here. And, okay, this pawn is in fact defended, so your position is still good. And that is true, in this position, there's a lot of ways to win. Some of them are better than others, though, and that's what I'm really trying to get at, is how do we do this as accurately as possible? To me, this kind of position, it's like this pawn structure is a bit looser than what it was before. It's a little bit more loose than what it was before. So that's where we again come back to this idea that the material is immaterial. What I mean by that, let's say white is now trying to attack this pawn. Instead of focusing on the material count, instead of obsessing about having to protect the pawn, the way forward for black, and the reason why this rook lift is so good, is because you carry on with the plan. This analysis board is so annoying. I'll definitely do this in a different way next time. But you carry on with the plan. Okay, you're attacking my pawn, but guess what? I'm going to double my rooks. I'm going to double my rooks. And the idea is, if you take my pawn, I'm going to play the move rook e1 check. And all of a sudden, there's only one legal move, which is knight takes rook. And at that point, we have rook takes knight. And because of the effect of the rook, and because of the rook being defended by the bishop, and because of this bishop still being on the board, was never traded off for the other bishop, cutting off the squares from the king that it would like to go and escape to, it is in fact a checkmate. It's a checkmate. So what we've found is actually defending this pawn is completely unnecessary. And by actually giving the pawn up and letting go of the idea that we need to hold on to the material belongings, letting go of that idea was the key to unlocking this position where we are better in this position. Remember this position back here, we're trying to find out what to do. It's not putting a knight here, it's not putting a bishop here, it's none of those things. It's not, doing something like this. It's playing a move. It's playing a move such as an incremental improvement, like doubling the rooks on the file, understanding that even if some of your material comes under pressure, you can carry on with this because the piece activity you get as a result literally causes you to win the game. This is a very clunky analysis. I'll do it on a different board next time. But for now, I'm going to carry on into another stream where I'm going to be playing in a tournament online, just a 15-minute games with 10-second increments. So strap in and we'll play that. It'll be less clunky. We'll see you there. Cheers.